We appreciate Clark's remarks, and we are going to get into our first panel, which will be focused on housing innovation in local communities across the country. And we would like to bring everyone out on stage. So first, we'd like to welcome Drew Maggelet, who will be moderating the panel. He's the Director of Housing for the Call to Action Foundation, and they are a close partner of our work at Ivory Innovations. We really appreciate them. Next, I'd like to welcome Troy Walker, who is the mayor of Draper and the past president of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. We're excited to hear about the great things happening in Draper right now. Dawn Ramsey, who is the mayor of South Jordan for the past 8 years. She's been a great partner and a recognized leader in her push for housing affordability and innovation in the state of Utah. Next, we'd like to welcome Henry Honorof, director of the Welcoming Neighbors Network, a network of place-based organizations around the country advancing pro-housing solutions from Montana to Rhode Island. And then lastly, Karl Eckhart, who's the VP of State and Local Government Affairs at the National Association of Home Builders. He's a well-known leader in the real estate and housing policy ecosystem, and we are so lucky to have them all here today. So I'll turn it over to Drew. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much, Abby, for that kind introduction to our panel today. Hello, I'm Drew Maggelet, as Abby mentioned. I'm with the Call to Action Foundation. Before we kind of move into some of the details of this panel, let's start with one big question. Now, we're here today at the Ivory Prize Summit to think about affordable housing. So, panelists, what is the single most important thing we need to be focused on when it comes to improving affordability in our communities here in Utah and in communities around the country? All right, crickets. Clark, let's start with you.
I wasn't sure who was supposed to go first, but I'm happy to. You know, I think my number one thing is housing affordability matters at every level. I can't tell you how frequently I go to a city or I'm working with someone on a project and they say, well, if you make this truly affordable, if this were under 300,000 or under 400,000, then we would make it happen for you. Well, that's great in some municipalities, in some areas, but in other areas, you can't hit those numbers. And what we need to start to understand is that every time a house is built and someone moves into that house, they move out of another home or apartment and it makes it available to someone else. And so, you know, there's some areas like Summit County where it's very expensive. Our most expensive homes in the state are there. And everyone said it doesn't really make a difference if you don't do homes that are 400,000. Well, guess what? We did $600,000 homes in an area where the median listing price was 1.7 million, and that was a home run. And even if we'd been building a $900,000 house and allowing someone to move out of the $600,000 house, making it available to someone who was moving out of a $300,000 house, it all makes a difference. So when municipalities or states focus only on affordability at one level, I think they make a huge mistake. Affordability matters at every single price point and at every single level. That's my number one.
Let's keep going across the row. Mayor Walker.
So my first new house I bought from Clark 21 years ago. And I remember I think I paid Clark like $550 for this house. I couldn't buy this house today. I couldn't buy it again because my house has just gone up. So I think as a mayor, it's price, like Clark said, but I think our job is to try and get anything we can in our communities that someone can buy, because I do think the ownership is really the future, you know, is what makes a difference in America. I have 4 kids. I have 3 still living with me. One of my sons is a chemical engineer. One of my daughter's a librarian. My other daughter's still in college. But my chemical engineer son is saving money because the price, the interest rates, and all of those things are difficult. He just doesn't want to buy something to buy it. He wants to buy something that he wants, that he can afford. And so I look across, you know, what happens in Draper. our zip code is expensive. You can't come to Draper and say we're going to build a single family home for 350,000. You can't do it because raw dirt's $1.2 million an acre. So your Clark's 100% right about that. But you can build, a $600,000 house or a 700, and that does work. I think that if the price, the ability to get people in that first home, to me is the most critical thing. Just speaking as a dad, wanting to get them out, but as a mayor, wanting people to have ownership. We all know that if people own their property, they take care of it. It's an investment in the community, and it makes a community. So.
Well, I think in Utah and across the United States, we know we need more housing. We don't have enough housing units right now to meet the need and the demand. Here in Utah specifically, I think the answer to that is infrastructure funding. I was at a panel the other day and somebody gave Cameron Deal a hard time. He's the director of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and said that Cameron makes up the number of housing units that have already been approved. And every time we talk to them, they say a different number. It's actually because it keeps going up. We have 200,000-ish housing units that could be built. Why have they not been built? We need the infrastructure. So I think in order to accommodate specifically here in Utah, the more housing that we need, we really do need to determine how best to fund the infrastructure to help us get those in, because the infrastructure has to go in first. And our governor says all the time, if infrastructure goes in first, quality of life is maintained. We do need to make sure that we can get the infrastructure in order to unlock all of those units and be able to get them built, which will result, hopefully, basic economics in bringing down the price of housing.
Thank you. Henry?
So, a couple things, but I'll focus on one for advocates and folks trying to persuade the public on the need for more homes. Our members have done a ton of polling and research on this. And to some degree, advocates need to stop talking about, and policymakers, stop talking about supply in the abstract. Nobody understands macroeconomics. Nobody really understands that more supply brings things down. I think the chain of moves, the musical chairs, is the best analogy. What we need to be talking about is options. We need to be talking about the homes of all shapes and sizes for all types of people at all stages of life. When you talk to the public about the need for starter homes, smaller homes on smaller lots, they get that. When you talk to the public about needing apartments near jobs, they get that. When you talk to the public about having age-friendly, smaller housing to downsize into, they get that. So we need to be talking about and also designing our policy around having options to meet all needs and all income levels based on the kind of product we're delivering. One of the problems I think that public policymakers have made for the last 50 years or so is legalizing just the type of housing that they themselves would want to live in at their stage of life, rather than thinking about legalizing a wide variety of options that all stages of life and all income levels.
Thanks. Let's finish with Karl.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. Very, very grateful to be here. I think I work at the National Association of Home Builders, and from my going around the country, I think the best thing that could happen is for everybody to just listen a little bit more. I think that if we can help the two mayors here have the hardest jobs on the planet. Being a mayor is great and terrible, right? And if we can help to push back on the NIMBY idea and allow those that don't have to have, and they still get reelected, then I think we'll start to make progress.
Thanks, Karl. Now let's talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, the Call to Innovations Partnership. Clark, while I would love to talk for hours about the benefits of this partnership, can you specifically talk a little bit about how we're leveraging philanthropic capital to build affordable housing?
You bet. We're very grateful for this partnership. We have two mission-driven foundations, Call to Action and Ivory Innovations. And after we got started with all of our programming with students and sort of innovative solutions, we said we need to put these into practice. We need to go build more. Obviously, we're a builder and we build a lot of housing, market rate housing, but we wanted to build more housing that was deed restricted, that was saved for those at the lower end of the ladder. And so we were ready to launch several projects when we found out that Crystal Maggelet and Drew and her team had just recently done a big transaction to sell their interest in Pilot Flying J, and they were developing a amazing, similar mission-based foundation. And we invited them in, and it's been amazing. While low-income housing tax credits had been sort of one area that they'd focused on, we figured we could do a lot of housing without any federal subsidy or without any even local. We do appreciate cities kicking in and helping us out and making projects work, but we started 7 projects that I think are very exciting, and so far I think we've invested $380 million in bringing forward 7 incredible projects throughout the state of Utah that I think are going to really make a difference. Our stuff is not all deed restricted. We have 25% of the residents in these communities can be, you know, above 80%, above 100%, but most of them are 80% or better, and a good portion of them, 40%, are at 60% AMI, which really helps move the needle for a lot of families.
Awesome. Thanks, Clark. Now, let's move on to the mayors. We are very fortunate at the Call to Innovations partnership to be in the building or planning process in both South Jordan and Draper. So, you know, without any sort of preference, you know, let's start with South Jordan and you, Mayor Ramsey. You know, let's talk about the South Jordan Senior Housing Project. How did you identify senior housing as a need? And also, how has it been working with local stakeholders to make this dream a reality?
Thank you. We're very excited about this project, which has been in the works for a long time. And I mean, it's complex. These public-private partnerships to bring about things in ways that have never been done take some time. And we appreciate our partners hanging in there with us as we work with landowners and all the things to get this done. So we recently announced 200 senior housing units that will be right next to, adjacent to a brand new senior center, 17,000 square foot senior center. And of course, if you're a senior and live anywhere else in South Jordan, you'll be welcome to use the senior center. It'll be a public senior center, but I think these housing units are critical, and they couldn't be done but for this partnership. At South Jordan, we've been trying to find a way, thinking outside the box to get this done. I'll tell you why I think senior housing is important. If we have kids, grandkids that are trying to get into the housing market, I think we all can appreciate absolutely critical, the American dream for our younger generation. We know that. But there's a lot of data that shows that as birth rates continue to drop and as the population grows at a smaller rate than it has in the past, we've got a very large population aging toward retirement and later years. And housing needs change. And as I spend time with the seniors, we have a very full house right now at our community center, which fills in as a senior center, and we're making it work, but we need a senior center. As I talk to these folks, they've been very candid about their housing situation. And, you know, when we announced this, we had people come and line up. They wanted to get on the list that very day. Porter Openshaw had to just start creating a waiting list because they said, how do we sign up? No one would picture this if they think of South Jordan, but I had a lady come up to me. She frequents the senior center. She loves it. Tears in her eyes. Everything I own is in my car. Nobody here knows I sleep in my car. My housing needs are different. My life looks very different than it used to. How can I get in? I had somebody else come up like this. There's emotion, raw emotion. My life is so different than it ever was. I had a really nice house, raised my family. We had a really good life. We made a good income. I'm now widowed. My kids are grown. This is what I need. I need a community, and this is my community, and I want to live near them. And I don't have any of the income I used to have. I live on Social Security, and I need housing I can afford. She said, I don't think I ever imagined my life would look like this, but it does now. We cannot forget the housing needs of our seniors as we have more and more seniors aging into that category, and housing needs change. And back to what you mentioned, any one of them that moves out of the home, whether it's where they raise their family, whatever it is, it does open up that supply chain for every different level of life. And we want our community to be somewhere where there's housing available for every stage of life, and where people can stay after they've raised their family. There's still a place for them to be and live in the same community as their grandkids or whatever. Very important. It could not happen but for this. And we're very excited. Is it 75% of these units are going to be in the affordable category? We did have somebody come up and ask me, I don't think I'm going to qualify for an affordable category. I think I just barely exceed that amount. Am I going to be able to live there? And she was thrilled to find out there would be some market rate housing too. So we're really trying to meet that need, and we couldn't do it without these good folks up here making it happen.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you in the city of South Jordan on that project. Now let's turn to Draper and the Vista Station project. Mayor Walker, it will be, the Vista Station project will be one of the first apartment buildings, and definitely the largest in the state, to be built using volumetric modular housing units. Now, we just passed statewide code that made it possible to build using offsite construction methods. But Draper was ahead of the curve. You started with us before that had even been codified. As a mayor, how do you think about doing new things and being first, whether on new building methods or on new ideas for affordable housing?
Well, a lot of times we're first in not getting it right. So it's good to be first in getting it right. I wish we had a better, an overall photograph of that site where this is going. I'm in my 18th year of elected office. I know, and I'm running for another term, so I could have issues. But when I was a council member, this particular area where Vista Station is, we zoned this 110 acres. We're the first ones to do it, unlimited height, unlimited density. And it had a tax assessed value back then of about just under $6 million. And it's a tax increment finance project, old school, not all the new PIDs, DIDs, and all the other stuff they've come up with. This was old regular tax increment financing. That project now has an assessed value of almost 700 million. So when you talk about doing the right thing at the right place, it really does work. This is cool because this is, Clark always says to me, time is money, and this makes the building almost as fast as you can do it. So we're excited about it. We think, I see no issues with the construction. I'm convinced the construction's probably, frankly, in some ways better because the units are, I'm really excited to see it come together, and I hope it can be a model going forward, because if we can get these units built quicker and faster, we can hit that supply side of the housing crisis. So our planning department, my city council, when we first started talking about this, we were like, yeah, why not? It's a great place to do it. Let's give it a try and see if we can make it work. And so that's an example of getting the politicians and the staff to take a new look at something. We've also partnered with Ivory on some of this deed restricted stuff in kind of near this area, not in the same, but within a mile of this. And that's been pretty successful. Mayor Ramsey kind of pioneered doing that in South Jordan. So it was really nice to have her team kind of innovate it, because we were able to kind of copy it, which made it a lot easier for us. So thank you. But to have, to look for opportunities to get people a place to live, and ultimately our goal, all of us, is to get them to have at least have an ability to own something at a right price. I think this is going to be amazing. I can't wait to see it start coming together.
Thanks, Mayor Walker. Thanks for sticking your neck out and coming with us on this incredible, innovative journey in modular housing. So we've heard from local leaders in Utah now about building affordable housing and helping our communities thrive. Now, let's turn to the national experts on our panel for the next couple of questions. And let's start with Henry. You heard Clark and the mayors describe Utah's affordable housing ecosystem. How would you describe this national moment on advocacy around housing affordability, and what communities should we be looking to for examples of effective policy solutions?
I love talking about this. This is particularly this moment in time where I think we're in week 4 of a federal government shutdown. The Pro-housing advocacy in America today might be the single issue where American democracy is working the way it's supposed to. Right now, in red, blue, and purple states alike, you have the most conservative Republicans working with the most progressive Democrats on evidence-based solutions to agreed upon problems. What else can you say that about right now? There is nothing that I can think of, and I don't think I'm solely biased. So for folks who aren't aware of us, Welcoming Neighbors Network, we are a national network of 58 state and local pro-housing organizations, including Florida Housing Coalition, that'll be honored here later today, and right here in Utah, Wasatch Advocates for Livable Communities, which some of you all may know. Our members have been the driving force behind basically every major pro-housing policy change in the country on the advocacy side. So we've had some really significant insights into this. And from about 2019, when the first state-level zoning standards passed in Oregon, to now, you've seen every single year be a bigger year than the last one, culminating so far in 2025, which has seen the biggest expansion of legalized workforce and affordable housing in modern history in the country. When you add up the apartment reforms passed in Texas and California and Washington State and Montana, to say nothing of smaller reforms in Rhode Island and New Hampshire, nothing has been as big as this last year. I'm a little nervous that next year we won't be able to continue that trajectory, but still hopeful. Now, in terms of who's getting it right across the country, there's nowhere that's getting it exactly right. Like Austin is probably the closest as of this year. The last couple of years in Austin, they have sort of speed run the pro-housing agenda. But in honor of the season, I will use a spooky metaphor. If you kind of Frankenstein together policies from a variety of localities and states, you get something that looks like the zoning code that we should have. So, we need to make sure that we can have mid-rise apartments in every commercial zone. The best version of that is probably in Montana, where in every commercial lot in Montana, you can build a 6-story apartment, which allows more people to live near their jobs, to be able to walk to work, to be able to walk to school. It's a much better situation, a much better planning process. Montana also, I believe, is the only state in the country that has effectively, as of about a year from now, done away with conditional use review. All of the public engagement, all of the decision-making is done in the planning process for the citywide plan, and then everything is by right from there. Pretty good system. When you start talking about otherwise expanding apartments, Washington State has the best statewide transit-oriented development, although Columbus, Ohio is an example I love to point to. Columbus just this past year, on just 4% of its city lots, legalized at least 80,000 new homes. Really significant reform. Arizona, I think, probably has the best accessory dwelling unit law in the country. You can build at least 2 ADUs per home in larger cities in Arizona. 3 if they're on larger lots. Portland, say what you will about it, Portland has figured out affordable homeownership in a way that basically no other city has. I live in Portland. We passed fourplexification in 2021 and then improved it in 2022. And the homes that have come online in those fourplexes are coming at about $200,000 to $300,000 less than other new homes on the market. We've unlocked a much, much more attainable price point for middle-class and working-class people through this reform. We're starting to see other reforms modeled on that spread across the country. Missoula, Montana is about to adopt one. Spokane, Washington has already adopted one. I'll go back to Austin. There are a couple cities in Texas. Austin probably has the best policy now, where there is no minimum lot size in the city in residential land over 1,500 square feet. There's a ton of cities across the country where the single biggest driver of housing cost is the land cost. And when you require folks to buy 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, a half acre of land, you are requiring an income level to be able to live in that. 1,500 square feet is much more attainable, and so you're going to start seeing much more affordable market rate homes coming online in Austin. And one through line through all those places I named is full parking flexibility. So we have these incredibly bureaucratic, arcane, nonsense, wasteful parking mandates in cities across the country. And we have found that when you remove those, not remove parking, Just let the property owner and the builder decide how much parking is going to be needed for that site. You unleash a huge amount of new housing. So if any of those places I named didn't have parking flexibility, it wouldn't be nearly as meaningful. In fact, it might not even be possible to build those homes. But with that parking flexibility layered onto those reforms, you have something really unlocking potential. And I guess one other thing I will say, and then I'll shut up, is that in many of those places, that innovation was unlocked by state zoning standards. So starting in 2019, Oregon and now a slew of red, blue, and purple states have passed kind of baseline standards that cities above a certain size need to follow in their zoning. It's not saying you have to have exactly this thing. It's saying you have to have some basic evidence-based standards to your zoning. And a kind of amazing thing happens when that gets adopted. Cities, including the cities that fought those reforms tooth and nail, go above and beyond the state standards. Because up until that point, the easiest thing to do is nothing. People don't like getting yelled at. I don't like getting yelled at. And for 50 years, at least, when you propose a new zoning change, you get yelled at.
We like getting
I love that for you. Some people don't like getting yelled at. But when you take the ability to do nothing away, then policymakers start thinking about how to solve the problem. And the solutions are actually pretty clear. You look around the country, you see where it's working, you take those solutions. And one other piece of that, and then literally is the last thing I'll say, is that NIMBYs don't know how to say anything other than no. So the smart thing for a NIMBY to do, I shouldn't be telling this in case any NIMBYs are watching, is to say to city councilors, mayors, just do the baseline state zoning standard. Just follow the standards, don't do anything above and beyond. But they don't say that. They say, how dare you even consider following these state standards? Which the city will get sued and lose if they do what they're being asked to do by the NIMBYs in that community. So it kind of self-marginalizes the NIMBYs, and then reasonable people get to come in and have a conversation saying, well, if you're actually trying to solve this problem, here are the 5 things you should do. And it really changes the game. So state zoning standards, even for folks that are local control true believers, empowers local innovation like nothing else.
Thank you, Henry. I completely agree. I really hope that 2026 offers even better things on the advocacy front. So thank you for those thoughts. Now, Karl, while you and Henry both operate on the national stage, you're also operating every day in states and local communities. Of course, the National Association of Home Builders is one of the most engaged organizations on the topic of housing affordability. What are you seeing when it comes to builders and their thoughts on improving housing affordability?
Thank you so much. And I agree, Henry, everything you said. So I think one thing to think about, we've done a lot of surveys and work on that word affordability. And I would encourage you to change to attainability. Affordability is gone. Your grandparents had that, but nobody in this room is ever going to have that again. Using 30% of your income from your house, that's over. So what can you attain? What can people attain? Maybe that is rental, and then they make their wealth in the stock market. Maybe that's their house, and they make their wealth in their house. How does that work differs now. I think that the real America has a housing policy crisis, even more so than a housing crisis. And it began at the local level, and it will be fixed at the local level. We are a federation made up of 600 local associations, and I work with almost all of them, trying to solve all these problems very, very locally. And it's interesting, the states have passed more housing laws in the past 2 sessions, as Henry said, than ever before. Yet the number of units built nationwide has not gone up over the past 2 years. Because the little old lady who lives next to the vacant lot wants her grandkids to play in that vacant lot and not have a fourplex built in that vacant lot. And so she yips at the mayor, and then there's no new housing built. That's the reality over and over and over again. And we need to find ways to push back on that. I think that getting the cities to really expand their comfort zones, like Utah, Austin, and all that are great. But then we need to make sure that the state laws passed, like Utah, you passed this amazing comprehensive housing bill, taking from all the good around the country. And yet the lot line was left out. And so now cities can use that. In Arkansas, we passed a design standards bill that said the city cannot use, is it brick or is it wood? Is it vinyl siding on the outside? But we forgot the pitch of the roof. And so the city said that the pitch of the roof has to be 2 degrees higher than it was before. And now you can decide that only rich people live there. One thing we're seeing a lot of, every town wants to land the new company, right? Land, not the data center anymore. We learned that's not helpful for housing, but get that new corporation there. Syracuse landed the new Micron microchip factory. And then the cities right around the factory all said, all new homes have to be 2,500 square feet or bigger and have a brick outside and a front-facing window and a front-facing garage. And all the workers can live in the next county over. That's why we have a housing problem in America, is because nobody wants to live next to those people. And so I think working on that will really get us a long ways. And we're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting the states to pass these bills and the cities to buy into it, like Henry said. But it's a long process, and I think it will take the next 10 years to really get this success.
Thanks, Karl. Now, we've spent a lot of time on this panel looking ahead, but just for a moment, let's look backwards. Clark, you've seen a lot of innovations across the country through the Ivory Prize for Housing Affordability. In fact, we'll be hearing from some of those innovators later today. Henry and Karl just mentioned that what they are seeing around the country. What are your reflections on the state of innovation in local communities around the country when it comes to housing?
I definitely think it's picking up steam, just like we heard from both Karl and Henry. But there's so many more municipalities and cities that need to get with it. I do think what will happen is that as we see states that become more competitive because of the right kind of housing policy that helps them provide the right kind of housing for all the workers that come with those jobs, that other states will feel the pressure. And there's nothing that sort of wakes up a city more than understanding that they're not going to get a facility or a new big job creator because of the lack of affordable housing in their own municipality. So I think it's going to be a competitive thing, actually, a market force thing that's going to cause many, many more cities to finally get with it. Those that are out in front right now that are already innovating are going to be at a huge advantage. And I think that's something that we can look forward to. But I'm very encouraged that there is starting to be a lot more done in this area of innovation. And I love seeing the entrepreneurs that we're honoring today. I can't wait for you all to hear from them because what they're doing is truly spectacular.
Thanks, Clark. All right, that was a nice little look back. But now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm excited for 2026. Karl and Henry, what is on tap for housing policy changes in 2026? Karl, we'll start with you.
Well, I can tell you the fix will not come from the federal government. They probably won't even be operating in 2026. So this election cycle, we've done several ballot measures, done a lot of polling in there. And the voting groups that are really focused on housing are 18 to 30-year-old women and 50 to 62-year-old women, which if you are aware or not, that's the smartest and most active group of humans right on the planet. And I want to stay in my hometown, and my mom really wants me to stay in my hometown. That is a voting block, 2 voting blocks that are going to dictate 2026 and 2028. And I think housing is important to them. I think that's going to be where we can push housing as a voting issue. Not right now, but when we're done, I'd encourage you to go to your phone and look up Let Builders Build Kansas City. We've been doing a big effort there to encourage education on why government is involved in housing and how the consumer and the government can work together to make housing more attainable. But I think 2026, we will see more localities do what the states have now done the past 2 sessions. But electorally, I really believe that this will be 26 and 28 will be the elections where housing is actually the key factor.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The number of polls that I have seen at the state level and national level where housing is a top 2 or top 1 issue is, I mean, it's almost everywhere. The problem is metastasized so intensely that it's being felt deeply by folks that never imagined feeling the housing squeeze before. One thing that I would expect in 2026 is that the laws that were passed in 2024 and 2025 start taking effect at the city level. So I think like one of the reasons that we haven't seen a ton of new homes from these really great state laws is that they were set up to take 2 or sometimes 3 years to implement. This is the state says, well, cities by the end of next year need to change their zoning to accommodate this. Well, it ends up, because of how cities work, they take that whole time to implement those policies. So, we had the kind of Montana miracle laws in 2023 where Montana did more than any state had in a single session. The first cities to implement that will be implementing them at the end of this year. So just about 2 whole years later. So I expect quite a few new cities to be adopting the state level zoning standards like we're seeing coming out of Texas, coming out of Washington, coming out of Montana in the next year or so. I would also say we expect the kind of aperture of the states considering this to continue expanding. We've had a number of states in the upper Midwest starting to really take attention. So I expect that to really start popping off in the next year or so. Michigan is going to have a really big session on this. Minnesota is going to have another really big session on this. A lot of places that were previously understood as like the bastions of affordability, because they were affordable, started attracting people, and then because they have the same zoning problems as everywhere else, have housing costs through the roof now. So we're starting to see energy pick up there. I also think we're going to see energy picking up in the New South. And we've seen Texas take a lot of action, starting to see Arkansas take some action, seen Florida take action, expecting that to start happening in North Carolina, in Virginia, in Georgia, among other places. So really seeing this as the crisis has metastasized to the entire country, we're seeing the response spread to the entire country, and I expect that to continue happening in 2026.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Henry and Karl. Now, I think we've reached the end of our panel, so let's, and again, really appreciate all the panelists for being up here and for providing great insights across their different areas of expertise. But let's end with this question. What is the most important thing for local leaders around the country to do to accelerate the adoption of innovative ideas? We started with Clark, so Karl, I'm going to go up to you again. Oh, sorry to catch you off guard, but
I think I kind of go back, like let people live in your city. Let the market dictate who's going to live in your city. Don't let anything else. I think that can be the most effective thing. Let's just, I grew up in Iowa, which is, I think, second to Utah in how nice we are. And I think just kind of go with that mentality. Like let people live in your town.
I'm going to cheat and do 2. Stop opposing state zoning standards. Stop telling your League of Cities to oppose state zoning standards. We need them and it'll help you. Second, if you're going to take big action in your municipality, build a coalition behind you. Whenever we see policymakers take this on their own without a coalition to help the community understand this as an issue that is supported by the community, these politicians walk into the thresher and the reform dies, and it dies pretty ugly. But when we find a coalition leading the way, and folks in the community can see that the organizations and institutions they trust support these ideas, we're smooth sailing for doing really big things.
Mayor Ramsey?
So I have 6 children, and our second daughter and her husband and their 3 very little boys have been living with us for almost 1.5 years. They moved to his hometown in Northern California and bought a home there that was barely livable, barely. They had to do some work before they could even live in the rudimentary conditions, and they worked really hard. They put all their blood, sweat, and tears into it and made it really great. He got laid off. They decided they wanted to raise their kids here in Utah, came back home, found a job here, sold their home in California. They've been living with us. And this week, it's been 3 days since they moved out into their home that they bought here in Utah. They're thrilled. It's what we want for them. It's what they've worked toward. That needs to be a story for more people. But there's one thing that comes to mind. So in South Jordan, we've taken advantage. We've worked hand in hand. Mayor Walker and I both have the unique opportunity because there's not very many of us that can say we've both served as president of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And so we've been at this policy table for a very long time. And we have a sophisticated enough system that we've taken advantage of the housing transit reinvestment zone here in Utah, and we've got 500 affordable units that'll go in as part of 4,500 units on our HTRZ, on our TRAX line in South Jordan, and all these things. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is all these cities we're talking about, they're of good size. They have sophisticated staffs. We have communities everywhere in Utah and across America that do not have that. They don't have the professional expertise. They don't have the staff. A few years ago, we were able to get legislation approved and funded to create a local administrative advisory program here in Utah for all of our rural communities who are part-time city councils who have a clerk. I mean, they have maybe 3-4 staff members, and they don't know how to do any of this. And so as much policy as comes out, it doesn't even matter because they're not equipped to do it. They don't know how to do it. This local administrative advisory program was meant to provide administrators like I have, like you have, that are very good at what they do and can help do some training, help with the planning, things that so many smaller communities don't have staff to do. The Utah legislature cut that funding this year, and we need it back. We do need that program back because if we want housing policy to work, we have to make sure that we're enabling people. There might actually be more good people who understand this than are getting credit for, but they don't have the tools or the wherewithal to bring it about in their communities. We need to make sure we're providing support, planning support. The state can say, do whatever you want. It won't matter if they literally aren't equipped to be able to do it. And we've got lots of folks in that position. So I think the most important thing, at least here in Utah, we can do is help empower our communities to have the ability to do what's been done. We've both done great things in our city without state mandates. We've been able to do it, and it's worked, and it's gone very well. Not everybody can do anywhere near what we've done. So I think that's really going to be important here in Utah. We need that funding back. We got to help support these folks that their hands are tied. They can't do it.
All right, we're running up against the clock a little bit. Mayor Walker, can you do it in 30 seconds?
Yeah, we just need to be as local governments open to listen and not just, you know, all politics are local, so we all feel it from our neighbors and our constituents, but just ability to look at a situation and go, okay, that does make sense to do that kind of housing over here. Let's just get our head around it. Be open to some of these concepts. I don't know if you guys know this, but we are a small government Republican legislature here in Utah, if that shocks anybody. Yet last year, and I see former President Niederhauser sitting there, last year our legislature passed 568 bills in 45 days. That's a small government Republicans working at it. Now, 200 and something of those bills affected local government, and a lot of it affected us with housing. So we need some time sometimes to be able to let the new laws sink in, figure out where we are. It's not that we're not always willing, but it's like a fire hose sometimes for us. But I think if local governments, mayors, councils are open to what we can do in the future, I think people will come along. I mean, not everyone, but the future's where we have to be, and we have to be willing and be nimble to do it.
All right, Clark, I'll let you have the last word.
You know, it's been a great panel, and I've loved everything. I've been making notes, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of your thoughts with some of our other city friends. But I would just say, number one, we need a we, not a they mentality. And as we work with cities, I would like to hear them say all the time, this is what we need to do. You know, instead of thinking all the time, this is what they have to do. We're in it together. And if we act as partners, there isn't anything we can't accomplish. So let's do it. We can do it together.
Awesome. That's it. Thank you so much to our panelists and everyone for being here today. We all appreciate it. Thank you.